Okay, done.
All right, good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Good morning. I am Kenneth Kidd, and this is my first conference this year. I just came on 6 months ago as the new executive director of Arthurdale Heritage up in Preston County. And I'm gifted to be here with Elizabeth Satterfield, who has been an amazing resource to me, as well as to the entire collection and everything at Arthurdale Heritage. And it's helped me kind of move in. Well, I have about 25 years of nonprofit experience. It was mostly in social services. I worked in housing and housing development and food programs, clothing programs, and family services. And so coming into the history space has been new to me. But Elizabeth has helped make that transition quite easy. See a few words about yourself.
Oh, sure. I'm Elizabeth. I'm the curator, director of education at Arthurdale Heritage. I've been there for over 3 years now, which is wild. I am from Taylor County, West Virginia, just about 10 miles from Arthurdale, and love history, love West Virginia, and I'm very passionate about connecting community to history. And I think that's the way that I've experienced it as being valuable, and how I see our community seeing it as valuable. So I do a lot of different things at Arthurdale. We all wear so many different hats, but I plan exhibits and programs and manage the archives and design marketing materials and plan school field trips, a little bit of everything. So it keeps us on our toes. And we're smaller station. But.
So for this next period of time, we're going to be talking about history as hub. And, the bottom line is, we're a museum. However, we're located in a rural, low-income corner of West Virginia. So we wind up playing a role that's much more than just being a museum, because we do have land. We do have a lot of open space. We do have sections of our campus that could serve other purposes. And so this is kind of what today's topic is going to be about. So we're going to walk you through and talk about kind of our experience, what is out there in the literature, and we'll have some of that here for you to look at afterwards, about using museums as those community spaces and taking advantage of the history you have. And Arthurdale has a really community-based history that we're able to launch from. Then we're going to have you kind of look at your own. We'll probably have one group discussion about that. So what's happening in your community, who surrounds you, who's your audience, what's their story? And then we'll talk a little about our personal experience in the spaces we have that have multiple use purposes, as well as single use, as well as we'll have an open discussion about the challenges. That once you open up your museum to other things in the community, you're gonna hit some rubs and some challenges. Where do you accidentally cross over outside your mission, and maybe go too far? And that's just one example of the challenges. And then we'll wrap it up with Q&A at the end. So we'll start out with our own mission and history. So today, our mission statement is to build a resilient community inspired by the history, legacy, and folk arts of the first New Deal community and its people. So this wasn't always our mission statement. Again, the big picture is Arthurdale was founded in 1934. We were the first New Deal community of the Roosevelt administration New Deal plan. This long history short, Eleanor Roosevelt visited northern West Virginia in 1933, visited some of the local coal mine camps, and was really disturbed by what she saw, went back and became a big advocate for the Homestead Act that would be built into the New Deal plan. Arthurdale was the first guinea pig experimental New Deal homestead community that would then inspire 99 others. But because we were the first and the guinea pig, Eleanor Roosevelt personally oversaw every aspect of Arthurdale's development to ensure that then she would get the funding to support the other 99. For those of you from other corners of the state, communities with similar histories, if you're down here in southern West Virginia, is the town of Eleanor in Putnam County, as well as the towns of Daly and Valley Bend in Randolph County, about 20 minutes south of Elkins. Those are two sister communities that would soon follow Arthurdale. And so In 1985, well, actually, I'm sorry, I'm saying one more thing about this. Our mission statement recently changed with the new strategic plan. For years, the mission statement was about the preservation and the running of the museum. This has shifted now, and you'll see that we became very people-oriented. And we're celebrating the history, legacy, and folk arts of the First Native Community and its people. So where we were very much a preservation, restoration, historical society for the first 40 years of our life, we're shifting that into much more of a community, people-focused organization. And that's what's pushing this whole presentation forward from this point. You'll see in 1985, it was the 50-year anniversary of the community. So they kind of had a homecoming party. And this is what the community came home to. And it was buildings, we have a campus. Well, it's about a 13 acres, right?
23.
23 acre campus. Most of the buildings were in a condition like this, after years of just misuse or unuse and disrepair. So today.
Whoa, went crazy.
This is that same corner. You might want to toggle back and forward again. So 1985, probably since roughly 1995.
Yeah.
Most of the restoration, a big chunk of the initial restoration on our core corner of Arthurdale had been completed. So that became the core of what we did, and was kind of the initial thrust of the early Arthurdale Heritage organization in the late 1980s into the 1990s. And the same process happened, throughout what would in the end be 13 different structures that you'll see here in a moment of the entire campus. This is a picture of, it was July 1985.
84.
Oh, 84.
We started the following year though.
So again, I'm new, and this is why Elizabeth is so helpful. But I gave those small dates. I'm still mastering some of the dates and the specific things. So the summer of 1984, when the community got together, celebrating the 50-year anniversary of the founding of the community, and when they really saw the conditions and decided, what can we do as a community to restore the history there and celebrate it and share it with other future generations. So this is kind of an overview, top down of the campus. So this is roughly the 23 acres. This is a major state highway coming down through the center of Preston County. There's a major intersection here. Eleanor Roosevelt had very little patience for doing a lot of road naming. So every road in the greater Arthurdale area is a letter. So the little town square pretty much sits at the corner of Q Road and A Road. So our offices sit at the corner of Q and A. The buildings you just saw that with the restoration sit right here along A Road. And you'll see more pictures as we go along of the historic Center Hall. We'll be talking about there was a furniture factory, there was some cooperative industries that community came together, as well as storage, a gas station, iron forge, cooperative store, and we've been blessed over the past 25 or so years to acquire 2 original homesteads that we've been able to restore and will be a core part of our talk here for the next little while. Then we kind of jump over here and we have the original schools. Again, there were 165 families that moved to Arthurdale and were relocated there. And it was very much, it was an experiment. The high schools were separate from the Preston County school system. It was progressive education. And so all the children were learning a whole variety of things in cooperative arts. And when you were here at the metal forge, you'd see young girls and they're learning metal skills. When you were in the weaving room and at the looms, there'd be young boys that were there at the looms. And it was very much Eleanor's model. Was it popular in Preston County? No. We were kind of, number one, everyone kind of moved to Arthurdale from outside the community. So there was a lot of unknowns that were coming into the community. 2, and the school system was kind of separate as Eleanor was implementing kind of this progressive education model that was a little bit foreign to this rural part of West Virginia.
Video.
So kind of be a flyover This is one of our homestead, this is at the far south end of our campus. This is our homestead. This is the barnyard where the dogs are. This is the ruins of our furniture factory. And kind of, you're flying over kind of the town community center, a big center hall building with 2 wings. This is an old church that was relocated and rebuilt there, became a community center. The federal administration building, the iron forge, and the gas station. The gas station is coming into view. And then a better view of kind of our center hall area. But what's key is you'll see this campus and you'll see all this green space that surrounds us too. So we're blessed to kind of have this campus area.
And this does not show our other homestead house.
Yeah,
Which we have pictures of later, farther back.
Down here. And how we've been able to take advantage of that other homestead house. Other things up here on the hill is the historic Arthurdale Inn, which is now privately owned by another group, the historic church in the community. But this whole thing, we're about 20 miles southeast of Morgantown is where we're located. So then we'll pass off to Elizabeth and talk more about the whole context of using museums.
So I wanted to have a little bit more context about what experts are saying about how museums interact with their communities. There was a study that was just finished in 2021 by Wilkening Consulting that was through the American Alliance of Museums that basically revisited a really important text from the 90s called Presence of the Past, which surveyed Americans and mostly to look at like public trust in museums. And what this study found in 2021, when it revisited these questions, was that the public still holds a tremendous amount of trust for museums and historic sites. And museum goers really are scoring high museums in terms of trust. And these are people who visited a single museum within the last 2 years. And generally, white people are seen as more trusting of museums than people of color, which makes sense for some of the systemic reasons we see across the country in terms of narratives. And the public generally believes that museums are presenting fact-based narratives, they're presenting real and authentic objects, and that we're research-oriented. And a lot of survey respondents saw museums as neutral, about 50%, but 30% said that they felt that museums could take a position on an issue, but it related to our mission and purpose. So that gives us, almost 80% of the surveyed participants are saying that museums should either be neutral or you can have an opinion, just kind of keep it within your mission, which gives us a lot of license to work within our communities. Another really important book is Shared Authority by Michael Frisch, which came out in 1990. And this is a little bit more focused on oral history work and public history work. But basically, Frisch says that museums should strive to engage the public in really meaningful ways, not just, I think we saw this last night in the keynote address, not just participation or kind of like patting the public on the head or just marketing and giving them information, but collaborating with the public and with your community in meaningful ways that actually generate content. And this can be give you really strong results that are super meaningful. But if anybody has ever worked with community members and other organizations, it can be very challenging and can take a lot longer. So that's something to consider when you're involving people outside your organization, that it does complicate things, often in positive ways, but then also in some ways it can be negative or difficult. Another book that came out in 2002 is all about historic house museums. This is an edited collection. I have a lot of these books up here, by the way. You're welcome to look at afterwards. But this book really encourages historic sites and museums to lean in to an immersive experience for visitors because you already have that at your site. And that context is already there, so why not lean into it even more? And also to look to your audience to understand what they're interested in, what they might need, and to think about that as you're coming up with programs, interpretation, and that can help feed creativity.
We did have a quick question. Does Arthurdale have, I'm guessing, National Register designation? Sounds perfect for a historic district.
Yes, we have been a historic district since 1989, and we are currently, well, I don't know what will happen now. I was thinking about this last night or this morning. we put in to have an upgraded status as a National Historic Landmark, and that's a very long process through the National Park Service and kind of a mysterious process that they don't tell you a lot about. But we put in for that well over a year ago, and who knows what will happen with the current state of affairs in the federal government, but we are a historic district, the entire community, the whole 1,200-acre community. Additionally, experts are saying that as museum authority and truth in general is challenged, that bringing the community alongside is even more important. So having participation is really key to quality historical content and bringing in expertise. If me as Elizabeth comes along and I say, well, I'm a public historian, I have a master's degree in history, I know all about this and I know how to do research and I can build a narrative, but I don't talk to anybody who actually lived through that experience, who currently lives in the community, I don't really engage anybody else, that can really throw a wrench in how that information is presented and accepted by the community. And places like Arthurdale, even though I think Arthurdale is like a lovely, welcoming place, can be kind of insular, and I think this is true of a lot of communities in West Virginia that are a little bit gun shy at times of outsiders and outside perspectives. If you're not including their voices and checking in with them and engaging them in meaningful ways, that can really diminish trust and engagement in the long run. And a couple other books I'll reference that are more recent publications. There's one called Change is Required, and this focuses on museums post-pandemic. And really at this point, if you want to stay relevant, our organizations have to change. We figured that out during COVID and we're still figuring out what that looks like. But this requires transparency, it requires community, and it requires experimentation. So don't be afraid to try new things. I think that's one of the main ideas that we have at Arthurdale, and Arthurdale's founded on. Yes, that book is.
Okay, I definitely want.
Yeah, definitely check this one out. Yeah, you're welcome to take a picture of it. It's got some really great, it's a edited collection of essays. That one's really good. I haven't read all of it yet, but it is really helpful. But yeah. And a quote from it is, we need to be present for communities that are looking to museums for programs about diversity and understanding, expanded public venues, and greater civic engagement. So really, people are looking to community organizations that are separate from the government, especially, and to help them stay engaged and provide these resources. And then something that's really relevant to Arthurdale, that I'm not sure is as relevant to others in this room, is that historic making, like in trades, is a really effective tool to make historic sites more dynamic and engaging. And this is all about hands-on interaction. So that can look differently for everyone. For us, this is the book, it's called Making History. It's about makerspaces and like historic trades and crafts and historic sites and museums. I think it can look lots of different ways. It's very applicable to Arthurdale. So what we have focused on at Arthurdale is using history as a launch pad. And that's kind of the title of our talk, is History as Hub. And what we have focused on is thinking really intently about the history of our site. Arthurdale is the first New Deal community. It was very focused on subsistence agriculture, on cooperative industry, on crafts, and on sustainability. Those are kind of our main tenets. And education, I would say, is another big one. So how can we take that history, which is very specific to our place, and convert it to something today and connect the present and the near future to our past? And that's that can be the case for every museum and historic site. Everybody has a distinct story to tell, and how can we look at that history and connect it to things today? Also, you need to be able to connect that with your mission. As Kenny said, we've recently changed our mission. I will read our old mission to you.
I'm glad you had that.
Yes, I pulled it up.
I didn't read the old.
I pulled it up last night. So to remind you of our new mission is to build a resilient community inspired by the history, legacy, and folk arts of the first New Deal community and its people. A few words to really hone in on there. Resilient was important to us. The word community was important. History, legacy, and folk arts are each important. And then talking about Arthurdale as the first New Deal community and people. It actually wasn't as bad of a conversation with our board as we were, as could have happened. I've been in other situations where we're trying to develop a mission statement and it's like pulling teeth. Ours went really well. We had a great strategic planner to help us. Our old mission, as Kitty mentioned, was very focused on preservation, and it reads, to restore and preserve the cultural heritage of the nation's first New Deal homestead community through education, community events, and operation of the New Deal Homestead Museum. First of all, it's too long, and also, like, we have done a lot of that already. We've already taken care of a lot of our buildings, and we're trying to move on from that. So whatever you're doing, make sure you're connecting that with the mission, and maybe you need to revise your mission. Maybe what you have worked really well 10, 15 years ago, and today is just not relevant. And that's where we got, where we're like, well, we're actually doing a lot of stuff that's not even reflected in our mission. And that is a problem where when we're writing grants, when we're going to donors, and also just for our own like mental thinking, like, okay, this is important to us, but if it's not connected to mission, like, should we be doing it? And then it's like, okay, maybe we shouldn't be doing it, or we should, but our mission is outdated. So think about your mission pretty critically. And then also look for gaps and needs of the community, which is what a lot of the scholarship is saying, and think about ways to fill them. So in our community, public space is really needed, community space is really needed, people need space to rent for birthday parties and baby showers. People want places to take prom pictures. People want spaces for yoga and fitness classes. There needs to be a polling place in our district. There's not a lot of cultural and artistic opportunities in our county unless you go to Morgantown, which is, not that far, but for some people, it's 30 minutes for us, but other parts of Preston County, it's well over an hour to get to Morgantown. We need studio space for artists, so we started thinking about what gaps and needs are in the community and if we're able to fill them. And the last point I'll make is that constant activity is the best preservation method, and it's also the best way to get people involved. So it's important to get people on site and to show the true value of your site and your museum. And visibility and engagement are important. If people are using the space, they'll value the space. And a good example is we have a family who has had birthday parties in our space, then they come back, they're having a big 50th anniversary party this year. When they come visit, they take tours, and their family members take tours, they stay in our Airbnb house. So people are repeat visitors, and that's what you want. You want people to be really invested. And that's a family that grew up in the community. I'm thinking of another family that she found out about Arthurdale because we had baby goat yoga, and which we can talk about more later. But that's how she first got connected with us, loved it, and they come to so many of our events. They're great regular donors, and they're big advocates for Arthurdale everywhere they go. So you can get people connected in a lot of different ways. So we're gonna do our activity now. So there's only a few of us, but that's okay. So I thought we could all think about our mission, maybe write it down, pull it up on your phone, and then think about a few important points about your site or your museum's history. So like I was saying, Arthurdale, we have a really strong focus on subsistence agriculture, sustainability, crafts, education. Think about that for your site, and then step back and separately think about needs in your community. And then we can all kind of like chat together about ways that maybe we can connect these. So we're gonna spend only maybe like 10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes on this at the most. Yeah, we don't have that much time. 5 minutes. So if anybody, it's a small group, so if somebody wants to share, I'm gonna sit back down for a minute. But you have something you would like to share, or ways that you think you might be able to connect?
I'll start.
Okay.
All right. Have you been to the Tomb Museum?
Yes.
You don't, okay. It's been a while since all that went on.
Yeah.
And just on a side note, we said that Dr. Neal could not be there for his museum opening. But anyway, ours is pretty much a static museum. We have a set space that's been that way since the 1990s. And there really was no mission for the museum because it was Dr. Tuma's personal collection. In 2017, he just found out his kids are really not interested in maintaining a museum. So rather than having it broken up, he donated it to the schoolhouse, just as I was retired. So I went from being a 40-year medical librarian to a new museum director. So I knew nothing about museums and all that, but we really have no mission. And I hadn't given a thought to a mission because it was just, okay, it's yours now, do it. So my focus has been for the past 7+ years, catalog.
Sure.
boy's catalog long.
Yeah.
Of the estimated 2,800 items in the collection, I am on 1,143. It takes a while, but I see the point where a mission is needed.
Yeah.
And you saw the big open space. We do have, we're essentially a venue that has lots of things. You've already mentioned birthday parties, 50th anniversaries. We've had a wedding and reception.
I've been to a reception. I've been to one there.
Oh, okay, well,
It was the reception.
when was it?
Oh, it was a number of years ago.
Oh, okay. If it's more than 7, I got
Probably about 10 years ago.
Okay, all right. Well, Dr. Tuma did essentially rent out the space for various occasions before. So there's been a history of us using the museum as a venue. And in fact, tonight we have the med school. I've got to get it right because it gets jumbled in my head. Sports Medicine Hall of Fame dinner. So if you were to go up there, if you came to the tour yesterday, yesterday, today it looks a whole lot different. That whole big empty space is full of tables and stuff. So we do have events. We have dinners for things connected on campus and off campus. So I've got to write a mission.
I think a mission really helps guide you, and it would also help justify, like, if you come up with a recommendation to take it back to the foundation, you say, well, this is our mission, and I mean, I guess the mission will have to be approved and go through a whole thing, but once you have it,
Yeah.
and then you have recommendations or ideas, and they're connected to the mission, it's harder to argue with that,
Yeah.
in my opinion, and it can help expand your offerings, for sure.
Right, well, in some ways, I'm restricted into what I can offer in terms of the venue side is taken care of by the dean's office, and I do private tours.
Yeah.
So I'll get a phone call and say, okay, we'll have a tour sometime.
Sure.
But anyway, the other thing I need to think about, I mean, I'm sure you have it in your plans and everything, is continuity.
Mhm.
Because I'm not gonna be there forever. So I've got to make sure that everything that I do in keeping the museum together and, you know, proceeding and adding collections and things like that has to be passed on.
Yeah.
I can't just leave a computer and say, there it is.
I've had that problem at my museum.
Yeah,
I've had people that have come in and they just disappear with all the login information for the website. So like if something happens with our domain name, we can't get in to make changes to it because someone else set up the domain.
right.
So yeah, if you have anything like that, you definitely want to have a hard paper copy of it to leave behind, not just a digital copy.
Like, here are all the passwords.
Here are all the passwords written down.
Anybody else want to share?
I was gonna, I was gonna share this. When I started at the radio museum, we weren't really a venue. We didn't do anything other than host swap meets and auctions. And then the whole broadcast, West Virginia Broadcasting Hall thing. And so when I started as a treasurer, I'm reading, I'm thinking about money, and I always learned a long time ago that for me, that what works is how do you make money? You advertise. You advertise to make money. So, you know, my wife and I, we're also amateur radio operators, and we started to get on the air with Santa and do the whole museum. And that started everybody in the museum, all of us thinking about, hey, we could do some more. And then, like, now my daughter's gonna have a wedding reception at the radio museum. My wife's company, Western Southern Financial, does a big sales campaign in the fall, and they come to the museum as for the big banquet at the end. So it's just a change of thinking for us, that just one little thing opened up the door that, hey, we really need to think about using the space, and it does make us more money. We host like Erie Echoes. I don't know if anybody around here has heard of them. They're the ghost hunting group here in Huntington. And they do a trick or treat at our museum. And that opens up. Our biggest problem at Huntington is nobody knows about the radio museum. And because of these things, we're getting more and more notoriety, we're getting donations, we're getting more visitors. So I think if you're looking at doing a venue, think about it strategically and for the future, think ahead about how we can, dream about how this.
So I work for a historic landmarks commission, and I think one of the issues that we've been having, our mission is basically to preserve the historic site structures and rural landscapes of Jefferson County. And one of the things we've been noticing was that it's a primarily agricultural county. There are a lot of people who are interested in learning like preservation skills, like cooking skills, old food ways. And we do have a long-running program of using one of the sites that we own. It's like, I think the oldest stick frame structure that currently stands in West Virginia as, like a place to interpret colonial bread making. And that has been going on for a number of years, but it's primarily the response or I guess the result of one man who just really likes colonial history and bread, which is wonderful, but he's now older and can't do it anymore. And so I guess while we would like to be doing all of these things, there isn't really the capacity.
Yeah.
And so I was wondering how much of the activities that you're doing are kind of put on by you specifically, and how much are you bringing in like other groups and hosting them at your site?
That's a great question.
I think you'll see it's right now, it's very much skewed to we're seeing the need, but we're the originator of the event. There's a couple, there'll be some pictures you'll see. There's a quilt documentation outside group coming and sets up shop, and they do quilt documentation of historic families bring in their quilts.
Yeah.
And spend a couple days, documenting their great grandmother's quilt and the patterns and all that. So, but we're still very skewed for the things that we're generating ourselves.
And I think the goal is for us to create more partnerships, because our capacity is also limited.
Yeah.
Where I have rack cards up here, you all can grab, and it shows all of our, these are not even all of our events this spring. We've added even more workshops and classes. And we rely really heavily on artisans, so like we're not the ones teaching the classes, but we find artisans and makers and experts and whoever in the nearby area to teach the classes, and we contract with them.
Okay.
So that's how we handle our classes and workshops for the most part, but we would like to see more of that so we can take more off our plates. I mean, there were a couple years where like I was the one teaching like quilting classes and embroidery classes, and we were teaching kids art class, and that's just, it was too much. And like, we can't do that. So finding partners in the community to be able to come alongside and help with programs like that is what I would recommend, and where the direction we're heading. Because that's the only, like, there's no way we can't put on all of these programs and events.
Yeah.
And we've limited it now, like, I would
Give
say,
a staff of 4.
Yeah, and
It's that total staff.
actually only 2 full-time, me and I are the only full-time.
yeah, you do have like one of the most prolific events calendars that I've seen.
Thank you.
It's very impressive.
Our goal was the space should be used, my goal personally, is
Yeah.
the space should be used
Yeah.
all the time. I wanna see people in the space always. But we limit it within our mission, we've gotten better about it. And then we've also been protective of our staff time, and we're still working on that, but yeah, that's a great question.
And Mark cued in on something got me thinking, is like, even the way that we're talking about it, that I would love to say that all this kind of growth, this national expansion and being so community focused is very altruistic. And it was so driven by our love of people and community. But the truth is, some of this was driven by, we need to create other revenue streams.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
the bottom
Don't
line
get
is,
into that.
yeah, and so
Yeah.
Get into that.
we're talking in the big fluffy, we love people community, which is true. But equally
Yeah,
true,
we can talk about maybe the types of spaces, that's a good lead in.
exactly, so equally true is that we have to be creative about the revenue streams coming in, and that drives us too.
Yeah.
Which then pushes us a little bit quicker, okay, let's talk to our community members and see. So there's a variety of things and opportunities that we've discovered in Arthurdale of how our space could be used. As how we were founded, and our mission is the interpretive. How are we sharing the stories of the people and the buildings and our relationships with the government? And that's our interpretive museum. But then we have our own events and programs. How are we celebrating it, bringing community together, whether it be fairs and festivals and And
Classes.
and square dances and community dances and music have always been a core part of the history. And whenever Eleanor came to town, the community gathered at the town hall. So to this day, no less than 4 or 5 times a year, there's a community square dance. One coming up next weekend.
Yeah.
In fact, there's one coming up next weekend.
I'm incarcerated.
And, or just concerts, bringing musicians in to play. That's classrooms. And that's where you're kind of carrying through those folk arts that go back to the cooperative nature of the community. And that was in fiber arts, woodworking, canning, coming from coal mines. So many of the families, they weren't familiar with animal husbandry, how to take care of a cow, how to take care of chickens. What do you do with these eggs? Let alone canning and foraging. And so we've come up using our campus as a classroom. Makerspaces and studios, partnering with those community artisans and master craftsmen that we can make space available. Here's an old barn that we've rehabbed that right now is sitting, we're able to do resident artists that come in. Just extra storage. We get, as the generations are passing, we're getting a lot more acquisition, or Elizabeth is being approached more and more with, I have my great-great-grandmother's bed and this chair that was made in Arthurdale
Yeah,
and
we
this
no longer
pottery,
take those two, we no longer take children.
because there's
Beds.
so much
Too many.
we have in storage.
Yeah.
Our own administrative offices, how we're reusing and how we combine. Elizabeth's office literally hovers in a loft over top of the main museum collection. So people are having, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, and she's trying to work on a grant, and there's actually tours happening underneath her in a big open air room. Rental space, the weddings, the baby showers. More and more, we're having more funeral luncheons. They go to the church for the funeral, and then the whole family comes over and they use our museum facility for their lunch. It's having a big outdoor space. We have a big outdoor space that is actually, you'll see photos in a moment of ruins of the furniture factory that we've been able to kind of recreate. It's going to be years before we have money to rebuild this structure. So for right now, hey, how do we make the most of it? The analogy I made to our outdoor space, and I'm dating myself, anyone that ever watched the sitcom Friends back in the 90s,
So the wedding,
there was an episode of Ross's wedding where 2 days before the wedding, the city demolishes the church and they don't realize it. So instead of canceling the wedding and everyone freaking out, they strung lights, they moved bricks out of the way, and they just reused that space and made it beautiful in a whole different way. So, and again, there's different things we do for single use and multi-purpose. We're gonna talk for a few minutes and show you some of our spaces.
we'll blast through
Yeah,
our spaces. So these are some multi-purpose spaces. This is during one of our exhibits in our hall, it was a temporary exhibit. We had a kids group come in, we were doing demos. It was fiber arts exhibit.
so at the center of our community is the Arthurdale Center Hall. And this was kind of one of the very first buildings that was constructed, other than the administration building. This is an old church that Eleanor Roosevelt saw about 5 miles up the road that was for sale. She had it taken apart, re-put together on the site, where it was gonna be the town center, and then had the wings at. This is the interior of the hall today. So you can see the opportunities there, everything from community-based concerts to, this is the quilt documentation we were talking about, and that group, what's the name of it?
It's the West Virginia Quilters Guild, I think. It's like a statewide quilt group.
And now they've discovered us, and so now we're gonna be part of their annual calendar. They're gonna come to northern West Virginia at least once a year and set up shop for a couple days, and they advertise, and people from all over the northern West Virginia region will come and bring their quilts for the day. Well, this is another, so this is our center hall set up for a wedding. And this is the yard out in front, so you see how, now granted, all we provide is the space. Some 8-foot tables, or round tables, and some pretty basic chairs. All of these decorations, not ours.
Yeah.
So we give them a basic blank slate. We can have up to
85.
85 people in the room. So we have tables and chairs for that number of people.
And it was discussed kind of early on when I started about, well, maybe we could become more of like a one-stop shop for weddings. Like we could have a caterer that we would, and he would also be our like events coordinator, and we would have all these slip covers for the chair, and it all fell apart. Thankfully, it was a little upsetting. It was a little upsetting at the time how it happened. Thank goodness we are not like in the wedding business. Like we open the space, you know, we rent the space, but like, thank goodness we're not coordinating any of
And that's how
that.
we're gonna close in a few minutes.
Yeah.
Challenge is, okay, what goes too far?
Yeah.
Then where does this become either too kitschy or we're committing too much? The center hall is kind of the centerpiece of the campus, that is used the most.
And the basement of Center Hall is this was a scary dark basement when I started, but there were looms in there, and women were weaving and for our weaving program. So I applied, I got some grants and we worked really hard, and I wish I'd done a before picture, it was horrible. I can't believe anybody was doing anything in this space. It's such a beautiful space now. We teach classes in here, we have an active fiber guild. There's storage built in, you can still access the furnaces in the back. But we also can use it as a classroom space for things outside of fiber arts. So there's Kendall, who's one of our weaving instructors, but we have a junior Appalachian musicians program, and the fiddle class it's small and they're all middle schoolers, and they play fiddle down in the loom room, which is cool. So it's
And there's weird acoustics down there, like even Claire, didn't she make a video down there?
yeah, she makes videos.
So
of
this
us.
is a local musician. She came and actually made a video in this room. So apparently the acoustics are way better than you think they would be.
Yeah. Another space we have is our blacksmith's forge. It is the original forge from the 30s, and almost everything in it is original to the 30s. And it's still a working forge, so we have demonstrations throughout the year, but we're also starting classes back up. We haven't had classes for a long time. Why not? Why only have a few demonstrations? People want to learn these skills, and these skills are rapidly fading. So figuring out ways, this is challenging because this is also part of our tour. So people, when they come to the museum, they go through the main museum space, then they come to the blacksmith's forge. So it has to be interpretive space, but it also has to like be space for demos, and it has to be space for classes. So it can be challenging to balance all of those things, and we're figuring that out this year.
Here, so this is the back, this is Center Hall where we just were. So this is behind that building. This at one time, the campus made a big horseshoe. This was historically the furniture factory. Now, the furniture factory at Arthurdale was never this huge market. It was a cooperative furniture factory. Pretty much everything they made here served 165 families. And the families and the individuals that worked here served those families. Well, this is what it looked like.
When I started.
Like 3 years ago.
Yes,
This is what it looks like today.
they thought I was crazy. I was like, I want this to be an outdoor event space with twinkle lights, and our contractor laughed at me. But here we are.
It's a place where people have picnics, you've had wedding receptions, we've had community dances out here in the summer months. So you'll see what that space has become. And this is taking that church that was demolished and putting a wedding in it. So it'll be years before we actually have all the money. This is not one of our top priorities to restore this. One day it's a priority, but it's a few years down the road. So for now, this is how we're able to utilize it. And in a couple of months, it's kind of behind this wall. We have a Shakespeare touring group that's gonna be out and giving a performance
Like in the round too.
in the
Yeah,
round, out in this
cool.
space. And it's gonna be something new for the community, expanding the arts in Arthurdale. How often do someone in rural Preston County have the opportunity? Is it Othello, like, or,
No, I think they're doing Henry VIII.
and, okay. So, one example of this space,
We only got a few minutes.
okay. This is we were able to acquire 2 museum houses. And this is one of the first ones they acquired, and it's actually officially a museum space. And it's completely refurbished on the inside to represent this was life in 1935. However, we have 2 other rooms that's kind of set aside upstairs. We're able to host guests. Some of our lecturers coming, they're able to stay up there. We have a couple of the descendants of the families, they've moved away. Whenever they come to visit, they're able to stay up there. We very seldom charge anyone to stay here in this space.
It's special for special people, not like the public.
Grad students doing research from WVU, it's about a half an hour, they can stay here and spend a few nights. So that's how we would utilize some of that museum, but you're actually living in the museum.
It looks
Do
like,
you have a question?
yeah, she does. For sites with controversial history like battlefields or former plantations, how do you balance respect for the sanctity of the site with community needs and expanding special interpretive offering?
That is a great
Ah.
question. We don't quite have that history of art at our site, but I know lots of places that do, and there are lots of plantations in the south that are beautiful wedding venues. And this has been called into question a lot in the last few years because people were enslaved at that site. I also think about sites like penitentiaries and like mental institutions that really capitalize on the history of their site, but like there was so much trauma at that site. How do you balance it? That's a great question. I don't have a specific answer to. It's something that I think the field is still figuring out. I lean towards not, if there's something traumatic or a very difficult history where people died or were like persecuted at that site, I don't want to capitalize on it. And I think that if there are needs in the community, there needs to be different spaces used. That's my personal opinion. We have a cemetery nearby that we don't own where enslaved people are buried. We would never, we're gonna put up some signage, but that signage is like, even signage, like the main interpretive signage will be at the very outskirts of the cemetery. And there will be another sign that marks where the enslaved people are buried, that's like a memorial marker. And we're very, I don't wanna say we keep quiet that it's there, but it's like, it's a reverence site. And like, we would never wanna do anything else with a site like a cemetery.
We never include that as part of our rental packages. For someone having a wedding, that's never included as part of the campus, they would be able to.
I just err on the side of, not capitalizing and making money off of other people's trauma and like persecution and tragedy. That's, and other places do, and that's how they make their money.
Yeah.
And I don't know, that's something that I think each side has to grapple with, and our field is certainly grappling with. And then there's places like, like concentration camps in Europe that people pay money to and go on these tours. And some of the sites where buildings don't exist anymore, people like picnic and fly kites and take selfies, and millions of Jews were systematically murdered in these places. So that side of dark tourism is its whole other thing. I'm not up on all the literature, but there's lots of literature available. I hope that's helpful, Bethany.
Well, Elizabeth, because we probably have about 10 minutes.
Yeah.
left. Can we get?
Yeah, I don't-
Let's see some of the space, we need to jump straight to the challenges.
Yeah, I think
The
so.
core of probably where the discussion for about 10 minutes could be is, yes, just what Bethany brought up. Yes, but this could go too far.
Yeah.
And where do you cross that line? So that was a perfect, so
This is our Airbnb. This is our barn that we're in the middle of restoring. It will be a makerspace with a outdoor patio attached to it. We're really excited about it.
inside of that barn.
It will be cleaner than this soon. Then just some outdoor shots and how beautiful our campus is. We have interpretation throughout, but it's also like almost public park space, even though we're a private organization. People picnic.
We're our fellow board members.
Yeah, that's what we did. We did a photo op for our website. But then we also have single use spaces like the museum, which is always just a museum. We have garages that we rent out, and that's all they are, with rental space. We have a hair salon on site, and then we have our craft shop. And these, those are spaces that are only used for one purpose, and that's okay. So some challenges.
So just some of the challenges, probably where I see really generating some discussion, because where Bethany kind of started going is, okay, where do you cross the line? And we've all, just in my 6 months, I've already seen some of these. One is, how much are you driven by revenue? Something we realized is that we did a comparison study, just within the past year, to visit some other local sites where we want to be open to weddings. But we realized we were charging about $750 for someone to come in and use our space.
Just way too low.
While other organizations near us, it started at like $4,000 to $5,000 just to even have the space with no amenities. And so we had to reanalyze that. And then when we started thinking, but then we took that maybe a little bit too far, and we started growing and thinking, okay, we have weddings, we have baby showers, we have funeral dinners, we have bridal showers, we've got all the different things, just random lunches that people would want to come in and have. How much are we charging? And we realized for weddings, we're able to get away with a lot more. The cost comparison with other like venues is way high. When you come down to someone having a baby shower in your space, a bridal shower, these are your local community people often that are having those smaller venues. it's gotta be back down at a reasonable level where you're making enough money to make a little bit of extra money, cover the cleaning costs, after the event, and your time of setting it up and moving tables in and out. So that's a challenge that we face, coming up with those cost comparisons. And where you cross that threshold. So right now, we did kind of really jumped. And
I mean,
now,
we're still under everybody else.
Yeah.
We're still like way more affordable than like Botanic Gardens or some other historic sites and other venues. We're still more affordable, but weddings are a lot of work and we should be compensated for the amount of work that weddings are.
so right now, like some of the weddings you saw where they're outside in the outdoor space, they're inside having their ceremony, they're using the front lawn. They're taking over a big chunk of our campus. That's gonna start at around $3,500. In middle of the summer, in the middle of the season. One thing though, that we always let whoever's using our space, our museum doesn't close. So there still may be a family of 4 that show up and they want a museum tour. We're not changing any of that because there's a wedding going on. And the people that are coming for the wedding realize our museum is still open. Public versus private space. Nothing I love more as I've been there is to witness and see, a family coming on Sunday afternoon and they set up a blanket out front and they're having a family picnic, even though we are private property. Nothing, I love seeing that. But then we'll realize it'll be random afternoons and a photographer shows up and there's a young woman taking her senior pictures and she's hanging off one of those pillars behind the building in the ruins and climbing all over the rocks
In like 4-inch heels.
and taking photographs. And a photographer is bringing all our clients down to take wedding photos or take engagement photos, prom pictures. And so what is public and what is private? We've hit that. And how much do we want to limit and where do we start upsetting the community if we start dropping some barriers as to. So one thing we came up with is maybe start working, we need to communicate better with local photographers. And create almost a special museum membership. That, okay, you're welcome to come, but get this museum membership and you can bring all the clients onto the property you want.
With advance notice.
With advance notice, just let us know what's happening.
Yeah.
And there'll be some safety guidelines before your client starts climbing all up over this set of furniture ruins. Or is, in our flower bed, posing among the azaleas or different landscaping we have. Rhododendrons, well, they have.
Don't say that.
So there's use versus we're getting more community based. And as Elizabeth described before, use is one of the best preservation tools. But at the same time, our building is getting a lot of wear and tear. In that center hall, we're talking now about how do we best preserve the floors of that hall with the constant wear and tear that's happening on it now versus us trying to preserve these beautiful pristine buildings that looks like they were just built 1934. But it's gonna be expensive to keep that up. Staying on mission versus drawing a line. How far do you go with your museum? Some suggestions that have come up, and you saw all that green space. I guess in this field is a big perfect example that it was brought up at one time. Oh, we need to fill this whole space with yurts and rent them out. And people can come and they can stay overnight. Or
Amphitheater.
I got an amphitheater back there. You should have concerts all the time all summer. To creating an RV park. What if you created an RV park on your campus and you just let people show up and rent? So we had to think that through. And part of me goes, well, why wouldn't we? We're kind of a tourist site. And why wouldn't we encourage that? Have people staying overnight, experiencing the grounds? But what is our mission and what are we preserving and celebrating in the community? And I think we've chosen more to go in that community arts way than in, which it is, I'm not saying, I'm not meaning to draw a line between touristy type things versus.
Yeah, you can be tourist friendly without compromising, the history of your site. And
Yeah.
for us, it's the historic landscape. This is how it always was. We're not putting an RV park or storage units. That was suggested. And I was like, oh, my dead body, will we put storage units? Because they're like, well, we need money.
It's easy revenue.
Yeah, and I'm like, well,
We've got the land.
yeah, but you've now sold your soul in like this historic landscape for, some cash, and that's, it's not, where are you gonna draw the line?
And do we create any fundraising gimmicks and naming opportunities? Like, are we gonna put plaques all over all of our historic buildings? This room and this historic homestead is dedicated to this family, and we've shied away from that. So we'll have some core plaques in core parts of the campus where we'll be able to recognize families, individuals that are the major donors, major contributors, but we're not gonna have a little names plate on every chair that we have in the museum.
Or every step, I've been in the museum where every step has one, I'm like, whoa.
We'll have a central plaque in the foyer somewhere,
Yeah.
or in the visitor center, where we'll celebrate the families. So, brick campaigns, we kind of concentrated that. We have a war memorial at one part of the campus.
World War II.
So we did have a brick campaign around that memorial to memorialize some of the veterans and families that sent people overseas during many of the major conflicts. But we kept that concentrated, and so the whole front of the museum is not a sidewalk covered with bricks with names on it. It is very concentrated to one place. But this is a challenge of what becomes mission creep, and you leave your mission for the sake of the community, or for the sake of making some extra money. We have kept it in a place where we're focusing on the creative arts and the folk arts that are part of Arthurdale's story and history. And we currently have that big hall where now we're partnering hopefully with our local senior center. And we're gonna have some activities for senior citizens that they can come in on every Wednesday morning, have a social time. Maybe we'll have some breakfast casseroles and some coffee out there, where we can become a gathering place and a meeting place. We have an Appalachian book club. So we're bringing people to the community, but we're staying within the things that are traditionally part of the Arthurdale history. As the community would have operated in the 1930s, of how they would have created community back then, being a gathering place.
Well, okay, we're a little bit out of time, but if we have questions or people have things that they would like to share or challenges that you might be facing, I think next is lunch break, so we can take a few minutes.
So the Historical Events Commission is obviously 5 commissioners. I am on the board of another historical, organization. And I've noticed, especially among kind of older folks in both of those organizations, there's like a fear of liability in terms of activities. So especially with like blacksmithing, right, there's like a slightly elevated risk there. How have you worked through any of that resistance?
Well, other than as long as I'm working with my insurance agent.
Yeah.
And they're giving me some guidance about their liabilities, but even that blacksmith, you use that one example, that is our one class, that there's an age limit. And we're
Okay.
working with the artisans and the master craftsmen themselves and getting their guidance, so.
And there's waivers, everybody signs a waiver, I mean, that doesn't prevent somebody from suing you, but it helps, we have good liability insurance. This is a concern, it comes up sometimes, I think we've kind of got past it a little bit. But yeah, we talk to our insurance agent regularly and we're open with them about what's going on.
Okay.
You don't wanna hide anything, because then if something does happen, you'd be screwed.
Yeah.
Yeah, the waivers, and then having set parameters, like, I mean, it's okay, like, to set parameters and guidelines and rules, but still have, still have those activities. Did you have another?
He wanted the contact info really quick.
And all of our information is also on our website, our contact information.
That's still that's really out of, hold on, I'll just type it to you. Give me 1 second.
But I can see definitely, you two don't have venues, I mean, you have the space, and you have unique niche type spaces. There's gonna be a certain personality that just is gonna totally geek out of being able to be surrounded by historic technology. They're gonna geek out about that. So again, using all these social media and targeting your audience and still staying true to why that museum exists and celebrating that technology, and these new generations who are learning from it are going to be inspired, and they probably have their own towers, in their backyards, and they're,
The other thing I would say about being anxious about people being in spaces or liability. I get anxious in the museum a little bit, especially right now, our museum is not, some of the items are not as secured as I would like, and we're working on that. So that's why that space is like a single use space, that we don't, you know, allow like cocktail hour. We did have a wedding where they're like, could you open the museum like an hour before the reception while we're getting pictures so guests can go over there and have cocktail hour? And we're like, yeah, but you cannot bring food or drinks in there. Like, we're happy to have people circulate and have a docent. Kenny was our docent and spent time in there and like answer people's questions, but everyone set their drink down outside. I get a little bit anxious in the house museum where it's small, the rooms are small, so like we don't do a lot of extra things in there, and like we cycle people through the rooms in shifts. You know, I'm not a big fan of like a bunch of barriers and stanchions, but there are a few places we have those where I'm like, okay, I don't mind people being in the blacksmith work, but they can't go past this workbench where like there's fire and hot things. So I have like 2 little stanchions, the rest of the space they can be in and be immersed. So I think there's ways to limit it while still allowing the experiences to happen. Any other questions or comments or challenges anybody wants to share?
Actually, where's Bethany? So Bethany, I'm still meeting everyone. So where's Bethany coming from? I'm not familiar.
Hold on, she's typing.
Who she work for?
Hi, I'm Bethany Hollingsworth. I'm in West Tennessee. I'm a grad student at MTSU in public history. I'm also a park guide at the National Park Service with Stones River National Battlefield, which is where I'm at today.
Oh, very cool.
We're happy to have you.
Well, thanks, everybody. Again, there's all of you.
Yeah, we have-
So
Yeah,
books about hosting makers in your museum space.
Yeah.
Changes required.
This one's about letting go, sharing authority, the Historic House Museum one. So yeah, you're welcome to take pictures of any of those. Most of these are published by the American Association for State and Local History. So they're a little bit pricey. I've acquired them slowly, and I have my cards. You have my purchases.
So you think if like.
This one?
This one good.
Oh, this one wasn't as much. I would say maybe 20 or 25
Just a little bit, right?
This one's a little bit more, and this one's a
Yeah,
little
this
bit
was
more.
like $40.
Yeah, this one I got for free or something. I can't remember. I got it somehow.
That's definitely something I need to look at though.
Yeah,
So I was
this
like,
one-
"Ooh, yeah,
This one was really good.
well, and I want my board to look at. It because they're really resistant. You know how we hear constantly, well, but we never did that.
And it's a lot of it, so I don't like that.
Well, that's because it was history.
Exactly.
So Ed, Mark, so one of our biggest partners is the local convention and visitors bureau, so there is a tie. And they're the ones printing these rap cards for us, so they're helping them.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, these classes.
Yeah.
All right, I'm gonna let you go, Bethany. Have a good lunch. See you later. It was nice to meet you. If you ever need anything, hit me up.
Oh, okay, well, I'm Mark, yeah, ready.
No of the main radio museum